Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another live chat with James here at the ProPic Studios in Vancouver, British Columbia. Don't forget that at any point throughout the show, you're welcome to call in and you can chat about news stories that we are covering or anything else. Grandma's chocolate chip cookies. You can talk about the weather or what you plan on doing. And now that the kids are going back to school and you're going to have hopefully some free time on your hands. But don't forget, the call in number is not only for those on the phone, but you can also call in using WhatsApp. The call in line for the studio number here is 1 368 997 6741. Once again, call in number for the live program is 1 368 997 6741. Feel free to call in and talk about anything that's on your mind. But let's get on with the show. Again, tonight we are going to track a series of events that touch on the very core of our sense of security, both here at home and on the world stage. We begin in Metro Vancouver, where public safety is under intense pressure. A quiet Abbotsford neighborhood is on edge after a family's home was riddled with bullets in the dead of the night. On the streets of Vancouver, a tragic morning claims the lives of two pedestrians in separate incidents yesterday. And in Maple Ridge, a grim discovery deepens the mystery of a missing woman. From there, we will broaden our focus, of course, to the province where British Columbia is facing for a massive public service strike that could impact everything from liquor sales to essential government services. We'll examine the high-stakes gamble that the BCGEU is taking in a fractured labor landscape. Nationally, a major shift in the trade war with the United States sees most retaliatory tariffs come down, but a new economic front is opening with China. The Canadian canola farmers are caught directly in the crossfire. We'll also cross the Rockies to Alberta, where controversial new legislation is targeting transgender youth in sports, and that will be taking effect, revealing a much broader political strategy at play. As we continue on, we will also look at the world stage where a devastating earthquake has hit in Afghanistan and prompting a massive international response, a crisis compounded by the nation's profound political isolation. At the same time, a suspected Russian act of electronic warfare targets the European Union's top official in a brazen act of intimidation. All that and more right here with me, James Kuzno, on Live Chat. I'd also like to thank our episode sponsor. Yes, it's Carry Movers yet once again. Thank you for your sponsorship. And helping to bring this show to our viewers. Carry Movers is Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley's best known family owned and operated moving company for over 2 decades. Carry Movers also provides office, commercial, industrial, and piano moving within the region. Further to that, of course, Carry Movers also provides long distance moves throughout Western Canada. You can get a free quote or rates online at www.carrymovers.com. That's KARY movers.com. All right, let's move on to our lead story, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, Abbotsford community has been shaken by a targeted shooting. Now, as I said, in the North Clearbrook neighborhood, where a scene of suburban tranquility was shattered in an instant just after 2 a.m. this morning, which would have been yesterday morning for most, residents on Balfour Drive were jolted awake by a volley of gunfire. Police were called to the 32,000 block of the street, arriving to find a family home peppered with bullet holes. A pickup truck parked near the residence was also struck. Inside the home, a family was fast asleep. Abbotsford police say that that while they were left understandably shaken, miraculously no one was physically injured. Neighbors described the terrifying sound. One told Global News, we just heard really loud noise, and it was terrifying because it was extremely loud. Another resident initially mistook the gunshots for the fireworks that are common in the area, a mistake they quickly corrected when they heard a car speeding away from the scene. The Abbotsford Police Department's Major Crimes Unit has taken over the investigation and is now searching for a dark-colored sedan leaving the area. They're appealing to the public for any witnesses or dashcam footage in the area at that time, and that again, it was in the area of Balfour Drive and Clearbrook Road between 1:45 and 2:30 a.m. What makes this incident particularly unsettling for both the community and investigators is the apparent randomness of the target. Abbotsford Police Sergeant Paul Walker has made it a point of telling the media that investigators have ruled out any connection to the region's ongoing gang conflicts. He added that the residence does not scream police contact, and he indicated that the family was not known to law enforcement. Now, this deliberate clarification by the police fundamentally changes the nature of the threat. While the gang-related violence is a persistent and serious concern in the Lower Mainland, it is often perceived by the public as a contained conflict between criminal organizations. The individuals involved, while living in our community, are seen as operating within a dangerous world of their own making. That is not the case here. But the attack on family with no criminal ties in a home that does not fit the profile of a gang target removes the psychological barrier. It introduces a more pervasive and unpredictable fear. The motive is a complete mystery. This creates a vacuum that is now being filled by neighborhood anxiety. As one resident told reporters, I'm quite surprised. I mean, this is normally a very quiet neighborhood. Nothing like this has happened in 12 years. Another expressed deep concern for the children who regularly play on the street, stating it shouldn't happen. The incident has transformed from a crime blotter item into a stark reminder of vulnerability, raising questions about personal safety in a place residents thought was safe. Now, let's take a movement across the river into Vancouver. Now, the theme of public safety under pressure continued on the streets of Vancouver this morning, and that was actually yesterday morning because it is late night here in Vancouver. Depending on what time zone you're in, we've just passed midnight here on September the 2nd. Now, as I said, the two pedestrians were deceased in the span of less than an hour in Vancouver, and that is just a tragic outcome. The first collision occurred just after 4:30 a.m. in South Vancouver, and Vancouver police say an 81-year-old man was crossing Southeast Marine Drive near Borden Street when he was struck by a gray Audi Q3 that was traveling westbound. Despite the life-saving efforts of the first responders, the senior was pronounced dead at the scene. The driver of the Audi did remain at the scene, and investigators have stated that neither speed nor impairment are considered to be contributing factors in this collision. Then, just 45 minutes later, at approximately 5:15 a.m., another fatal incident unfolded at the busy intersection of East Hastings and Commercial Drive. A woman, reported to be in her 30s, was crossing Commercial Drive when she was struck by a 2002 Toyota Sienna. Paramedics fought to save her, but she too died from her injuries at the scene. The driver of the Sienna also remained and is cooperating with the investigation. Vancouver Police Department's Collision Investigation Unit is now handling both cases and has issued separate appeals for witnesses or anyone again with dashcam footage to come forward. Reporting on these two distinct tragedies back to back creates a powerful and sobering narrative that goes beyond individual accidents. It highlights a systemic issue of pedestrian vulnerability within our Metro Vancouver region. Both incidents occurred in low light, pre-dawn hours, a time of reduced visibility for both drivers and pedestrians. One victim was a senior citizen, a demographic known to be at a higher risk in traffic collisions. As at both locations, Southeast Marine Drive and the intersection of Hastings and Commercial are major high-volume thoroughfares designed primarily to move vehicle traffic quickly. By examining these events together, we see a pattern of vulnerability emerge. It's implicitly raising broader questions about road safety, intersection design, and inherent conflicts that exist between vehicles and people in dense, growing urban environments. These are not just unfortunate incidents, but symptoms of a larger urban planning challenge. prompting a necessary community conversation about how we make our streets safer to everyone who uses them. And on a side note there, I'd like to point out, while I was in Ukraine several years ago in 2022, just after the war started out, one thing that I did notice about many of their intersections is that they have implemented LED lighting, not only in terms of the traffic signals, but on the posts themselves and across the bar that supports the lights. They are filled with LEDs, so the whole pole and bar, as well as the signal lights, turn red or green. It is a huge improvement in terms of the visibility, not only for pedestrians, but also for traffic at a much further distance. Again, something that maybe Metro Vancouver could take a look at and maybe study. Again, I invite them to reach out to our media department. We would definitely be happy to look at doing some type of a study and prototype of the LED system with the city or with ICBC or anybody else to try a pilot project and see if we can make our streets safer for everyone. Now we turn to a devastating story out of Maple Ridge, where a major investigation by the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, or IHIT, has reached a grim milestone. For days, police temps have been a fixture at a home on Gillis Place, a quiet cul-de-sac that seems to have become a center for the search of a missing woman. That search is for 43-year-old Jessica Cunningham. She was last seen in June of this year and was officially reported missing to Ridge Meadows RCMP in July. Now this week, IHIT confirmed what many in the community had feared. Investigators have located human remains at the property. While the BC Coroner Service is still working to formally confirm the identity of the remains, the focus of the homicide investigation is squarely on Ms. Cunningham's disappearance. In a significant development, police have arrested and charged Miley Barron, who IHIT has confirmed was Ms. Cunningham's intimate partner and lived with her in the home where the remains were found. Mr. Barron was arrested on August the 26th and appeared in court in Port Coquitlam on August 27th and currently remains in custody. However, the specific charge laid against him is both unusual and revealing. Miley Brown has not been charged with murder. He is facing one count of committing an indignity to a human body. The legal distinction is critical. It tells a deeper story about the current state of the investigation and the horrific nature of this crime. The charge suggests that while police and prosecutors are confident they have evidence of a disturbing act that occurred after a death, the precise cause and circumstances of the death itself may be still under investigation or may be difficult to prove conclusively. This could be due to the condition of the remains or other evidentiary challenges. Now, the legal strategy points directly to a deeply disturbing case of alleged intimate partner violence. The charge of indignity implies a profound disrespect for the human victim that continued long after her life had ended. It frames the narrative not just as a potential homicide, but as a particularly grim and tragic case where the alleged perpetrator's actions after the victim's death constitute the initial provable crime. IHIT is now working to build a detailed timeline of Jessica Cunningham's activities in the days and weeks leading up to her disappearance and is urging anyone with information to contact them. If you do not wish to contact the police, of course, you can always reach out to Crime Stoppers to give information and tips anonymously. So please, if you have information, reach out and help give some peace to this individual. Now, as we continue on, let's take a look at our sponsor once again before we move on to top stories from across British Columbia. Yes, planning a move within Metro Vancouver, whether you're in Langley, Surrey, Vancouver, or Abbotsford, you need a team that knows your neighborhood. Carey Movers Limited is that team. They are built on a foundation of trust and accountability, treating your belongings if they were their own. They understand that moving is stressful, and their goal is to provide you with peace of mind for a trouble-free move with a team that values your trust. Visit careymovers.com. That's www.careymovers.com, K-A-R-Y movers.com. Now, back to our news. The top provincial story is that BC is bracing for a widespread public service strike. And yes, we're back with this again. It seems like every week there's somebody else going on strike that is more than an inconvenience. The entire province is now on strike watch for the BC General Employees Union. Yes, the BCGEU. This represents more than 34,000 public service workers, and that is officially issued a 72-hour strike notice. This means job action could begin as early as Tuesday morning, potentially disrupting a wide range of government services. The move follows an overwhelming strike mandate from its members, with a remarkably high turnout of over 86% of eligible members casting a ballot. An emphatic 92.7% voted in favor of walking off the job. At the heart of the dispute, of course, is the cost of living, and that was according to Paul Finch, the union president. He says the government's current contract offer simply does not meet the urgency of affordability crisis facing frontline workers. A survey conducted of the union or by the union this spring revealed a stark picture. Approximately half of its members are living paycheck to paycheck, with some forced to work second jobs just to make ends meet. The union's key demands include competitive wages that keep pace with inflation, fair access to telework options, and a limit on the hiring of non-union managers, which the union claims is happening at twice the rate of frontline workers. The potential impact of a strike, of course, is significant, and no industry is watching more nervously than the hospitality sector. Restaurants, bars, and pubs are deeply concerned about a repeat of the 2022 BCGEU strike. During that job action, picket lines were set up outside of 4 major BC liquor distribution branch warehouses, effectively cutting off the supply of alcohol to businesses across the province. That 2-week disruption cost the industry millions of dollars and took months to recover from. The BC Restaurant and Food Service Association says another disruption now would be devastating. But there is more than standard labor negotiations. It's a high-stakes political and economic test, both for the government and the union. And the BCGEU's position has been complicated by a major development from another union. Just last week, the Hospital Employees Union, or HEU, which has twice as many members as the BCGEU, announced it had reached a tentative agreement with the government. That deal appears to be based on the very same contract framework that the BCGEU is so forcefully rejecting. This will create a significant fracture in what could otherwise be a united public sector labor front. It weakens the BCGEU's bargaining position, as the government can now point to the HEU agreement and frame the BCGEU's demands as unreasonable outliers. Now, the internal division among the unions, set against a backdrop of public anxiety over service disruptions, means that the BCGEU is risking not just a failed negotiation, but also a potential loss of public support and leverage. It's a high-stakes gamble in a suddenly fractured labor landscape. An environmental update: the wildfire surge across British Columbia. We are seeing at the same time as the province battling with that crisis of the labor front, we're also seeing the crisis on the environmental front. Over the past week, British Columbia has seen an explosive increase in wildfire activity. The number of active blazes has surged from just 68 to nearly 160 as of yesterday afternoon. The primary driver of the surge is a massive amount of lightning. The BC Wildfire Service reports that nearly 4,400 lightning strikes were recorded across the province on Friday and Saturday. That was followed by over 1,000 more on Sunday. An estimated 75% of all currently active fires are believed to be lightning caused. This is a textbook example of climate change-driven feedback loop. The massive electrical storm did not happen in a vacuum. It followed record-breaking 10-day heat wave with temperatures soaring 5 to 6 degrees above seasonal norms. That prolonged intense heat left forests and grasslands exceptionally dry, creating a landscape of tinder-dry fuel highly susceptible to ignition. When the dry lightning storm moved through, it was like throwing thousands of matches onto a bed of kindling. The sheer speed and scale of these new ignitions demonstrate how modern wildfire seasons are characterized by these explosive, unpredictable events. The rapid jump in fire numbers suggests that conventional firefighting resources are being stretched to their limits. The focus quickly shifts from the suppression of every fire to triage, protecting lives, homes, and critical infrastructure first. Now, the impact is already being felt in communities. Evacuation orders and alerts have been issued by the Caribou Regional District for the area around the Tetsy Lake wildfire. In the East Kootenay, an evacuation alert is in effect for properties near Bugaboo Provincial Park, where a 1.5 square kilometer fire is burning out of control. Meanwhile, thick smoke from these fires has prompted special air quality statements from Environment Canada for vast regions of the province, including the Caribou, Chilcotin, Prince George, and the Northeast. With conditions expected to persist for the next 24 to 48 hours. Again, if you're in those areas, keep in mind of these special weather statements. Now, let's take a look at the unrelenting overdose crisis. We turn now to the longest running public health emergency in British Columbia's history, and that is the toxic drug crisis. 9 years after the emergency was first declared, the crisis continues to extract a devastating and unrelenting toll on individuals, families, and communities across the province of British Columbia. The numbers remain staggering. Since 2016, more than 16,000 people in British Columbia have lost their lives to toxic drugs. In the past year alone, an average of more than 6 people died every single day. National data confirms that British Columbia, along with Alberta and Ontario, remain the epicenter of the crisis, accounting for the vast majority of all apparent opioid toxicity deaths in Canada. The primary driver of these deaths continues to be fentanyl, which is involved in approximately 3/4 of all fatalities. The scale of the government response over the past 9 years has been immense, and it includes the creation of dedicated Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, the first of its kind in North America, and the allocation of hundreds of millions of dollars in targeted funding. The strategy has been multi-pronged, of course, focusing on harm reduction, treatment, and prevention. Key initiatives include widespread distribution of life-saving naloxone kits through programs like Take Home Naloxone, support for supervised consumption and overdose prevention sites, and the establishment of a network of Foundry Centers to provide integrated care for youth aged 12 to 24. Yet this does present a tragic paradox. Despite a massive, sustained, and well-funded public health response, the death toll remains at catastrophic levels, with recent years being among the deadliest on record. This demonstrates that the crisis is not a static problem. The illegal drug supply has become a moving target, constantly evolving to become more toxic and more unpredictable. Illicit fentanyl is often contaminated with other dangerous substances, creating a volatile cocktail that can defeat even the most robust harm reduction measures. The government, of course, has been working hard, as well as the healthcare system itself, and they are essentially fighting a war of attrition. They have built an impressive defensive wall of interventions, and without them, the death toll would undoubtedly be even higher. But the weapon being used against the population, the drug supply itself, it's constantly being re-engineered to be more lethal. This forces an ever-escalating and adaptive response simply to keep the death toll from climbing even further. It's a desperate race where the solutions of yesterday are struggling to cope with the lethal realities of today. As we move to our national report, we'd like to once again thank our sponsor for making this broadcast possible. Is your business on the move? An office relocation requires precision, experience, and the right equipment. Carry Movers Limited specializes in commercial and office moves of any size. Their highly experienced crews come equipped with proper pads and dollies to ensure your valuable office equipment and furniture are handled with care. They pride themselves on of completing every move on time and on budget, minimizing downtime so you can get back to business. For a commercial move, you can count on Carry Movers and visit them online at www.carrymovers.com. That's K-A-R-Y movers.com. Now, a major shift in Canada-US trade. We begin our national coverage with a major development in the ongoing trade dispute between Canada and the United States. Effective yesterday, September the 1st, the Canadian government has removed its retaliatory tariffs on most goods imported from the United States. This move reverses a series of countermeasures that were first imposed in March of 2025. Those tariffs targeted billions of dollars worth of American products, from orange juice and coffee to appliances and motorcycles, among other items. And that was in direct response to American tariffs on Canadian goods. The reason for this change is reciprocity. Yes, the US government had previously issued an executive order exempting any Canadian goods that is compliant with the CUSMA agreement or CUSMA agreement from its own tariffs. Now, that single move made more than 85% of Canadian goods entering the US tariff-free. Today, Canada is aligning its policy with the American approach, de-escalating the broader trade conflict. However, this is not a full surrender in the trade war. Critically, Canadian counter tariffs on three key sectors, U.S. steel, aluminum, and automobiles, will remain in full effect. The government's reasoning is that the United States continues to levy its own tariffs on these specific Canadian industries without providing any of the CUSMA exemptions. The move should be seen not as a capitulation, but as a strategic recalibration ahead of a much bigger battle. By dropping the broad-based tariffs that affected a wide range of consumer goods, Canada is de-escalating the general conflict. This allows the government to focus its political and economic capital on defending three core industrial sectors that remain under threat. It's also a gesture of goodwill, an effort to stabilize the overall trade relationship as both countries prepare for the critical CUSMA review negotiations scheduled to happen in 2026. This isn't about ending the trade war, it's about settling the table for the next more important negotiations. As we look at the U.S. tariffs, we also have to turn our heads and look towards China. Their tariffs are hitting our Canadian canola farmers very heavily. Now, even as trade tensions ease on one front, they're escalating dramatically on another. Canada's canola farmers are now facing what the industry is calling a gut punch from the second largest trading partner, China. Beijing has imposed a preliminary anti-dumping fee or duty of 75.8% on all imports of Canadian canola seed, a move that took effect in mid-August. This massive new tariff comes on top of a 100% tariff on Canadian canola oil and meal that was imposed back in March. The combined effect of these duties, according to the Canadian Council of the Canola Council of Canada, has effectively closed the Chinese market to the Canadian canola industry. This is a devastating blow. Before previous disputes began, Canada's canola seed exports to China were valued at $2.8 billion annually, and that's a billion with B. China's official rationale is that Canada is dumping canola into its market at unfairly low prices, an allegation that the Canadian industry vehemently denies. However, the move is widely seen as a direct and targeted retaliation for Canada's own tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles, steel, and aluminum. When viewed in conjunction with the ongoing, though reduced, trade friction with the United States, this report reveals that the Canadian farmers are caught in a devastating geopolitical pincer movement. They are being squeezed by unresolved protectionism from their largest trading partner and aggressive retaliation from their second largest. This demonstrates the extreme vulnerability of Canada's export dependent resource economy. Canadian agriculture products are being used as pawns in larger disputes over electric vehicles and industrial metals. Our farmers are becoming collateral damage in superpower politics, facing uncertainty in their two most important markets for reasons that have nothing to do with how they grow their crops. As we look as well across the country, we are back here in Canada looking across the Rockies towards Alberta. We end our national report in Alberta, where a controversial and divisive piece of legislation takes effect as of yesterday. The Alberta Government Fairness and Safety in Sport Act, also known as Bill 29, officially becomes law. The act bans transgender athletes who are 12 years of age and older from competing in female-only amateur sports divisions. As a result, schools, universities, and amateur sports organizations across the province are now required to develop their own processes to confirm the sex assigned to an athlete at birth. Edmonton Public Schools, for example, has announced it will begin sending home confirmation forms for guardians to sign for any student who wishes to participate in competitive girls' sports. The government of Premier Danielle Smith has defended the act, framing it as a necessary measure to protect fairness and safety in women's sports. However, this legislation is not an isolated policy. It was introduced as part of a coordinated package of 3 bills targeting transgender youth. The other 2 bills include Bill 27, which requires parental consent for any name or pronoun change for students under 16 at school, and Bill 26, which bans gender-affirming medical treatments like puberty blockers or hormone therapies for minors. Now, transgender advocates and medical experts, as well as legal groups, have condemned the legislative package. They argue the sports bill is discriminatory, a form of gender policing built on fear and misinformation, rather than conclusive scientific evidence. Critics also warn that the impact will extend far beyond transgender athletes, potentially stigmatizing any young female athlete who doesn't conform to traditional feminine stereotypes or of strength and appearance. Now, the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act appears to be the most public-facing and emotionally resonant part of a much broader bill and legislative agenda. By focusing on the highly contentious and easily misunderstood issue of sports, the government is employing a classic political strategy. It's using a wedge issue to build public support and provide political cover for the more invasive and far-reaching policies affecting healthcare and education. The debate over sports is the tip of the spear for a much larger ideological push that is fundamentally reshaping the rights and recognition of transgender youth in Alberta. As we turn to our global headlines, we will first take one more break for our sponsor. Yes, are you moving to a new city? Carry Movers Limited makes long-distance moving smooth and reliable. They provide direct fleet moving services throughout British Columbia, Alberta, and other parts of Western Canada using their own direct trucks. And that means a greater accountability and a seamless experience from start to finish. No third parties, no unexpected delays, and because all rates are provided in writing, no unexpected additional expenses. Now, their experienced crews are committed to completing your move on time and on budget. For peace of mind on your long-distance move, trust the experts. Visit www.carrymovers.com today. That's www.karymovers.com. Now, let's get back to our international headlines. International security alert, and that is because there is suspected Russian GPS jamming targets, including the EU chief's plane. We'll begin our world report with a chilling incident over the skies of Eastern Europe that's being treated as a brazen act of electronic warfare. An aircraft carrying the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, was targeted by significant and sustained GPS jamming as it approached the city of Plovdiv in Bulgaria. The disruption of the plane's navigation systems was so severe that, according to officials, the entire airport area's GPS signal went dark. The pilots were forced to circle for nearly an hour before landing the plane manually, resorting to the old school method of using paper maps. Now, the plane landed safely, but the incident is being taken with utmost seriousness. Bulgarian authorities and EU officials have stated they suspect the jamming was a result of a blatant interference by Russia. This was not a random technical glitch. It is the latest and arguably the most high profile in a string of nearly 80 documented incidents of Russian electronic interference across Europe. For months, countries along the EU's eastern flank, particularly in the Baltic region, have warned of increased Russian activity that includes both jamming, which overwhelms a signal, and spoofing, which transmits false location data to mislead a receiver. This act of electronic warfare appears to be calculated and brazen act of political intimidation. The target was not just any aircraft, it was the personal plane of the European Union's highest ranking official, an outspoken and fierce critic of Vladimir Putin and the war in Ukraine. By targeting her directly, Russia is sending a direct, albeit deniable, message of capabilities and its disregard for international norms and civilian safety. It represents a significant escalation in hybrid warfare tactics, deliberately blurring the line between military action and civil disruption to create instability and fear in the highest levels of European leadership. As we move on, we are going to take a look at a global humanitarian crisis, and that is a devastating earthquake that struck Afghanistan. We're going to end our broadcast tonight with a story of immense tragedy and a monumental humanitarian challenge. A powerful magnitude 6.0 earthquake has struck the remote and mountainous region of eastern Afghanistan, with its epicenter located near the city of Jalalabad. The death toll as of last evening has surpassed 800 people, with more than 2,500 reported injuries. Officials warn that these numbers are tragically expected to rise as rescue teams struggle to reach isolated villages. The earthquake's shallow depth, only about 8 to 10 kilometers below the surface, amplified its destructive power. Entire villages constructed of traditional mud and stone have been flattened, many collapsing on top of sleeping families in the middle of the night. The devastation is compounded by landslides, which have blocked critical roads and are severely hampering rescue efforts. The international community is mobilizing a massive aid response, and the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has pledged that the UN will spare no effort to help those in need. UN agencies, including the World Health Organization, UNICEF, the High Commissioner for Refugees, are all on the ground delivering essential medical supplies, assessing the needs, and coordinating the helicopter evacuation of critically injured. Several nations, including India, Iran, and China, have also pledged assistance. Now, this natural disaster is a tragedy amplified by the man-made political and humanitarian crisis that has engulfed Afghanistan since the Taliban takeover in 2021. The earthquake has struck a nation where the infrastructure is fragile and the government is internationally isolated, and the flow of foreign aid has been severely curtailed. Hospitals are already overflowing, running out of beds, blood, and medicines. Therefore, the international aid response is not just a logistical challenge of reaching a disaster zone, it is a complex diplomatic operation. Aid agencies must navigate the political realities of working with an unrecognized de facto regime to deliver life-saving support. The earthquake is the immediate catastrophe, but the long-term recovery is profoundly handicapped by the country's political isolation. Saving lives in Afghanistan tonight is as much a diplomatic challenge as it is a medical and logistical one. Now, for our final recap, ladies and gentlemen, that is our program for today. A quick recap of our top stories. Police in Abbotsford are searching for a motive after a family home was targeted by gunfire. An incident they say is not gang related. Meanwhile, British Columbia is on the verge of a major public service strike as the BCGEU has issued a 72-hour strike notice. On the national stage, Canada is caught in a trade pincer, easing tensions with the United States while facing new tariff war with China over canola. And on the world stage, a horrific earthquake has devastated eastern Afghanistan, while a suspected Russian cyber attack targeted the plane of the EU's top official. Tomorrow night, we will be back with more live chat with James. And of course, as always, feel free to call in during the show. Our call in line during live episodes is 1-368-997-6741. And that is also available on WhatsApp. That's 1-368-997-6741. Thanks again to Carry Movers for making tonight's broadcast possible. For your local long distance or commercial moves, you can find them online at www.carrymovers.com. That's Kary movers.com. That's all the time we have tonight. Thank you for joining us on Live Chat with James here at the studios in Vancouver, British Columbia at ProPix TV. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest developments on these stories and more. To have a good day, everyone. Stay safe, and thanks again for tuning in.